thought that'd be useful. And we can show it to Sharon Kemp at S7, and we can get some brownie points for doing some good things. Okay, I mean, obviously we haven't met, we haven't been able to meet. We didn't really get around to doing anything last year. I think we were all just firefighting, running to catch up. We've traditionally tried to have at least one face-to-face, sometimes two face-to-face meetings a year, where we've kind of taken it in turn to host and so on. And it's been quite nice to go to somewhere else and sit around a table and have a real coffee and so on. But this is a kind of quite a time-efficient way of doing things, I suppose. And I would say, perhaps the use of various online things for us has been our kind of main COVID best practice type, the benefit, if we can talk about it, of COVID. But I wanted to find out what other people had been doing and think about our sort of careers development and best practice that has developed during COVID. Godalming, do you want to to start on that and let us know what you've been doing and how you've adapted?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like everyone, we suddenly had to move everything online, including our kind of UCAS processes. So that was a little bit challenging, certainly at the beginning of the autumn term last year. Marion, with some help from her son-in-law, came up with using Flow on Teams to help the process, so it became a completely digital process rather than any pieces of paper going around, and we're going to continue with that next year. In terms of our interviews, we just moved all our interviews online, so we were doing calls on Teams with students. We're now back to doing face-to-face interviews, but we are also doing some interviews on Teams as well. So perhaps a good thing is that we're able to offer both, and that what suits a student. So in terms of, if a student is not in on an afternoon, we can still call them via Teams, and some students prefer that. So I think in a way that's been okay. I much prefer face-to-face interviews personally, but we're leaving it up to the student to perhaps decide as to whether they would rather have a face-to-face interview or a call on Teams. That's anything else, Marion, that you think we should? Oh, we did our Future Fridays all on Teams. So whereas we would normally have our kind of next steps events, progression events with employers, apprenticeship providers and higher education providers coming into college, we moved that all onto Teams. So we had 4 Fridays where the whole concentration was on careers progression. We had a general progression morning where we had recorded talks done specifically for Godalming College on what the main progression routes were, so gap years, university, apprenticeships, employment. And then the following week we had one which covered kind of broad career areas that might be accessible for all students regardless of what subjects they're doing. So broad areas such as STEM, creative careers, can't think of the other areas now, Marion. What else did we have? Creative careers, STEM, finance and business, law, those kind of areas that cover the broad areas. And then our second 2 were subject specific ones, so that was kind of linking to the Gatsby benchmarks of embedding things within the curriculum. So each curriculum area provided a minimum of kind of 8-10 talks all about careers linked to their subject area. And those resources, although we encourage students to engage on that particular morning, and we sent messages out to parents and said please encourage them to do that, they're now got those on Teams, so they have those accessible to them basically till the end of term. And we did some feedback on that, and generally the students said they enjoyed all the talks, but when we asked the question, would you preferred talks in person, they all said yes. So perhaps they're just all fed up listening to everything virtually and online. But yeah, I mean, it was having done it online, we could do it again online, having all set it up. I don't think you don't get quite the buzz, do you, of visitors coming in, and perhaps there's a bit of a restriction on students being able to ask questions. They can only ask questions via chat, etc. But we have done it.
Reigate, what about you? By the way, we've now got Sam with us as well from Reigate, so
Yeah,
without camera, but
there's three of us. Sam might want to add something about work experience. And I'll talk, because I think Carolyn probably hasn't been here long enough, although it's quite useful having her perspective from somebody who's seeing us kind of afresh. I think one thing that's gone really well are all the kind of parent meetings that we have. So we have during the year lots of parent meetings, and obviously we're all big colleges, and trying to get in parents physically for meetings is really difficult. So I think that's been really helpful, and we'll definitely keep all of those online. So we have a meeting that we call Beyond Reigate, and that's in February, and that's where we have talked about applying for apprenticeships and applying for universities, and how parents can support their students and what we do in college, and that'll definitely stay online. And we can actually also, I think, add some extra meetings in. So in September we're having a UCAS one and an apprenticeship one that we possibly haven't really got enough to say if we were going to get parents in for a meeting, because parents wouldn't, we have such a big catchment area, sometimes parents are travelling a long way and they wouldn't want to travel all that way just to have a sort of half-hour meeting. And we always feel like we have to put something big on if we're going to get them into college. But just to give them updates about our UCAS processes in September is going to be so helpful. I think it's going to really help the team fielding phone calls, because obviously we'll be able to record that, and then when parents ring up with, why is my son or daughter's UCAS application not being sent off yet, we can refer them to recording and so on. So that's definitely a good thing. Likewise with the Oxbridge mock interview, so we did lots of those with our kind of big work with Reigate Grammar here, and it was easier to set those up online. And obviously that means I'd really like to explore perhaps going further afield to source mock interviews for Oxford students this year. And so that's really, those things have been really positive, I think. Interesting about kind of continuing with holding the careers interviews remotely, because they did seem to work well, and even actually sometimes on a phone call. So when we started working remotely, Carol had a college phone, and she could actually just ring students, and some of them were much more forthcoming without having the face-to-face contact. Things that haven't gone so well, I guess, just coming fresh from our careers fair, that would normally be a big event in our refectory with lots of employers, handing out lots of free tat to everybody, and students walking around with their parents. It did feel a bit lacking in something doing that, I think, remotely, although probably for the students that actually engaged and joined, maybe actually a better experience, because they really did. I hosted a Nestle one and also sat in on part of an Army and RAF one, and the quality of the kind of experience they were getting was probably better, actually. They were asking a lot of questions, they were really engaged, but numbers were really down. So we had 5 webinars, and across them all we probably had about 100 students, which we're quite pleased with, but it's still, I mean, compared with the number of people that we get at the face-to-face event, it was tiny, really. And employers were a little bit more reluctant, I think, to join. I thought they'd be happier to join and contribute this year than they were last year, when they were still getting used to being remote. But actually, yeah, we still had some employers that I think would have come if it was face-to-face, but weren't so happy to engage virtually. So yeah, that I think we don't want to keep online. Likewise, same thing with our HE fair that we have, which is in February, where the universities visit us. There's a real buzz about having nearly 100 universities in our sports hall, handing out their different tat and talking to people. So definitely keep those things face to face in the future. I don't. Sam, do you want to add anything about work experience? Unless you can.
I think for me, I would say Springpod's been a great addition. The range of things that they've offered, broken down the geographical barriers. I think there's definitely a lot of positive in being able to do it virtually. And those that are doing it, some have done it really, really well. So you can even, get a tour, and they get lots of different people involved, and you can get feedback on your tasks. So it is really possible to do a good virtual alternative. Obviously, it is still good to try and visit somewhere in person if you can. So a hybrid model, I think, going forward, it seems to be, Kat, I don't know, or anyone else that's looking specifically at work experience, I don't know what you think, but certainly the noises I'm hearing is that virtual is definitely going to continue for the foreseeable. I think everyone's really, really positive about it. But what you might get is, you know, maybe smaller or more local offices saying, look, when we're happy to have our staff back, normally we can perhaps accommodate smaller numbers, but it's going to make it harder to, you know, then it becomes a kind of numbers trade-off, doesn't it? You can obviously reach a lot of people on these virtual models, whereas if you're going into an office, even if it's a big office, they're going to say, but our boardroom only takes 20 and perhaps we only want to have 10 people in there for a while. So yeah, just very briefly, that's my my take on things. I've been a bit disappointed so far with the levels of numbers that have engaged with the virtual offering. Although it's going well, I think there's a lot of upside scope. So that's something that we're going to work on. And I think, you know, what I'm really impressed with is the range of, it's not your usual accountancy, law, those traditional work experience type offerings. It's everything from events and sport and psychology, you know, all the things I always have students say, would love to get some psychology work experience, and that, for example, is really hard when SpringPod do offer that. And also, I guess the ones who really need it, so that, you know, the medicine, the NHS and teaching, but even teaching, SpringPod have managed to somehow do something that addresses other aspects of teaching other than being in a school and seeing that classroom setting. So I think the offering's fantastic. I think what we need to work on is upping those engagement numbers, but that's fine. We know that we've tried and tested it, and we know that we've had great feedback from students. So I think it's all good, very positive.
Collins, do you want to sort of say what you've done? I mean, I know you've all come into post very recently, but do you want to share what you've done a bit?
Yes, of course. Unfortunately, in February, we should have had we call it our Not Going to Uni event, but it's going to be rebranded because it is literally just like a careers fair, but it also includes our Deputy Principal, Steve Martell, doing question and answers with a panel where parents and students sit and listen, and he sort of interviews them. That was cancelled, and at the time it wasn't replaced with an online version. Next year we would be planning to host that as an actual face-to-face event, and if we didn't, I would then make sure that it was hosted remotely. What we've done instead of, I can't remember who it was that said now they've been doing Teams meetings for parents with regards to careers advice. I think that was Reigate. What we've done is we've recorded, so Ian and I, the two directors of progression, have recorded a lot of presentations that we've then put onto a specific parent portal and then sent out an email, and through tutorial we've highlighted it to our students that new bits of information are going up on the parent portal, and then they've got access to the type of events that we would have been talking about face to face, like the higher education evening, and then an evening for apprenticeship information. So I think we weren't quite ready to be. Again, that came straight after I came into post, so we weren't quite ready to host as a meeting, but we recorded and then put onto the platform, which has been successful. And then any parent that does ring up student services with questions, the first sort of point of call is that they refer them to the parent portal and say, have a look at these recordings, and there's other documents on there as well that I directed at parents. We currently are doing a progression whole half-term series of tutorial events, and Ian and I alternate each week with recorded information for the students in tutorial. So this week it's UCAS, next week I'll be delivering a presentation on apprenticeships and the different types and how to apply. So we've made the most of using technology to record. We haven't explored, in terms of careers and progression, the live events quite so much, although our temporary new careers advisor is offering careers meetings face to face and on a Teams call as well.
Brilliant.
And Sarah, if you want to say something.
Oh, sorry, I was going to ask Rebecca, what platform do you use for recording your talks?
We just do it as a recorded PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, right.
And then it's just uploaded onto our parent portal.
Okay, because we've been using screencasting quite a bit, but I've not experimented with anything else.
Yeah, no, ours quite basic, but works well. It talks through the slides. You know, there's a little version of me in the corner talking to the parents. I can make myself bigger if I want to, and not bigger if I don't want to. So yeah,
that's really good. Yeah, thanks.
Very, very easy and simplistic. I'll pass over to Sarah to talk about work experience.
Hi. Yes, so I have come in really only knowing the virtual offering. So since I've been here, it's really been exploring all of the virtual options and setting up a SharePoint site that we have here in order to sort of promote and make all of our students aware of all of the different options available to them. I would echo what Sam said in that I've been quite impressed by the range of different experiences and options that are available. There is a huge amount, and every week I'm finding that there's a lot of information to give our students. However, I too have been a bit disappointed with the uptake and the engagement from our students with it. It's kind of very small numbers, so I'm really hoping that some face-to-face work experience can start soon, because it's slightly demoralising when there's only a handful that are really getting involved, and it's often the same students that I see again and again. So yeah.
Okay. Can I just ask, actually, are any of you using something like Springpod or any other platforms where you've bought in a whole package of virtual work experience that all of the students are expected to participate in? Has anyone done that?
Well, shall I sort of yeah, we have as well. Do you want to talk
we
about
have. So I'm desperate. This is what we're desperate to hear about, Nicola.
I was going to say, do you want to hear about what we've been up to?
Well, I was
going to say, I'll start, and then Kat, who kind of actually did the donkey work on it. I mean, we have just had at the beginning of last week what I feel has been quite an amazing sort of set of numbers. I managed to. We went and made a bit of a shot in the dark to go with a company, social enterprise company called 8 Billion Ideas. They were called 7 Billion Ideas when we started, but they grew 8 Billion Ideas, who are a bit of a sort of startup. It was a link initially from somebody who I knew as a mum in the playground, whose daughter was the same age as my son. She contacted me on LinkedIn, having just got a new job as PA to the guy who is behind this outfit, saying, you might be interested in this. Her daughter was at Esher at the time. You might be interested in what we're putting on. And what this company, 8 Billion Ideas, does is sort of online entrepreneurship education. And it's originally started off very much during lockdown, offering Saturday courses and kind of holiday courses that they wanted parents to sign up to to keep their kids amused and sort of as a kind of extracurricular activity type thing. And then they started working with schools, and they've done quite a lot of work internationally, which of course they can do because it's all online and virtual. But they wanted to get involved with us because they wanted to see if they could scale up what they were doing. And we were obviously interested because we could see the possibility of hitting a lot of students and getting our numbers into something decent. And we had to kind of, I went to senior management and I said, I'd really like to do this, but it's going to be a financial commitment on our part, because we had to guarantee a minimum number of participants with 8 Billion Ideas for them to be interested in kind of working with us, which was fair enough because they didn't want to put time and effort into something without knowing they were going to get some money for it. And we also decided didn't we, Kat, that we wanted to actually charge the students for this, even though
Yeah.
some of the things they can do with SpringPod and so on are free. We wanted to charge the students because a bit of a charge is a bit of a kind of buy-in. It's a bit of a commitment. In the years gone by, those of us who can remember Trident used to charge about 35 quid for doing the health and safety checks in about 1990 or whatever. So, you know, a charge I don't think is unreasonable. And they obviously, if they were travelling, would be paying travel costs. So we charged £30 for a 3-day virtual experience, £10 a day. We felt it was low enough that we could cover those who were on bursary and free school meals. We actually signed all of those up sort of without, they had to say they didn't want to do it. We paid for a few extras anyway, but the vast majority paid for themselves and were able to do so. And the 3-day program was offered over the 3 days at the beginning after half term, when we were doing our tags and there was an inset day. So actually it was 3 days. It was 2 days the students wouldn't have been in college anyway. And the 3rd day effectively was all that we kind of gave up. And we said to 6-1s, this 3 days is for work experience. You either organise your own or you do the internship. So we actually presented them with an alternative, and it was a 3-day period. And over the 3 days, we had about 83% doing something. So we had 478 sign up for the internship. We got a bit of a drop off. What was it, Kat?
The drop off was minimal. It really was, but there was a drop off of about 30.
Which, considering it was the 3 days at
Yeah.
the beginning of last week when the weather was so stunning, we
Yeah.
didn't think it
Yeah.
was too bad. And we got over 300 who organised their own work
Which was
experiences.
really surprising, wasn't it, actually? A lot of them were virtual, weren't they, as well?
Yeah,
Not a
quite a
massive
lot.
proportion,
Yeah.
but SpringPod, Speakers for Schools, invest in those three.
Yeah, about 10,
Sam,
15% of them are the SpringPod do-it-yourself type, you know, and some of them, if they'd already done them in half term or whatever, we said that counts. You don't have to do something in these 3 days. You've already done it. You've already taken out 3 days of your holiday or whatever. So we had about 35 of those virtual ones, and with Brighton and Sussex Medical School and stuff. But an awful lot of kids worked with their parents, you know, at the dining room table because their parents are working remotely. But actually, that I still feel was some value.
Yeah.
And we, you know, we did an online form. We checked with all of we did a big mail merge to all of the people who said that they were offering work experience. Thank you for offering, you know, for Fred Blogs, from Esher Sixth Form College. Confirm that you've read our safeguarding. Fill out your insurance details and so on. So we did all of that using Microsoft Forms, which was so much easier than having the old-fashioned bits of paper. So literally to get over 80, we've had over 80% of our kids doing something, which we've never ever got anything like that before, because previously our work experience has been blocked against what we've called Wider Skills Week, which was basically fun and games. Let's go on a trip to Munich or Berlin or Vesuvius or whatever. And of course, if the option is let's go and do some fun stuff like that or do work experience, it's let's go and do the fun stuff. But these 3 days have proved really, really good way of hitting really big numbers. And I've campaigned and I've got a similar 3 days, I think actually in the run up to May half term next year, to do the same thing. You will do work experience. It's either this or this. And by providing the virtual alternative in the internship, it's really ramped up the numbers of kids who've managed to get their own work experience themselves. And some of them got brilliant stuff. And there's obviously a lot of good contacts. And what we will be doing next year is Kat will be providing more of those from here as well. So we will provide the contacts for more of the students too. But the internship itself, I mean, Kat, do you want to explain a bit about what they did over the 3 days?
Over the 3 days, it was a success, wasn't it, Nicola? However, there were a few things that we want to look at.
Explain what they did for the 3 days.
What they did for the 3 days is they had to, we set it up against the Gatsby benchmark. So they had to, there was set a brief on each day, and each day there was a different speaker. The first day was a speaker, an entrepreneur, who talked about getting skills in entrepreneurship, and they had to set a problem to solve. The second day was a speaker called Jez Brooks, who's from IBM, and that was more about solving was it financial issues, really, business issues within the business sector?
Morning. Well, in the morning, the speakers were in the afternoon. In the morning, they started at 9, and in the morning they had 3 separate sessions.
Yeah.
And the first thing was about identifying a problem, and the second was about generating ideas to solve a problem. So the first thing was about identifying problems, and for each of these there was what they called the Notion page, which had worksheets and questions and resources that they either could have printed out if they wanted to, but they could equally use online. So they went to the sort of webinar effectively. They went to the Notion page. They had some worksheets that went with it. There was some information that was given. The first day was presented by 2 youngsters who were in their 20s themselves about identifying problems, coming up with a problem, and about then formulating that problem into something which was tangible. So it was about phrasing a problem statement, which was actually quite a good activity. And then the second session was about generating ideas, and just how you can generate ideas and how you can record your ideas and so on. And then the third bit was about creating a prototype. And so literally sort of whether you do it on paper, whether you do it with bits of cardboard, whether you do it with kitchen items, whether you do it with whatever, generating some sort of prototype for whatever it is. So it's very much the starting point of being an entrepreneur, but dealing with any problem actually. And then in the afternoon, it was the keynote speaker, and Kieran was a really good, he was a youngster, he was about 25, and he was really inspirational and gave them lots of advice. And then the talks on the second day were about the mechanics more of sort of being an entrepreneur in a sense. So they were about, unfortunately, one of the glitches was one of the activities required them to use the .gov.uk website, which just coincided with the hour last Tuesday that the .gov.uk website went down for the first time in however
that was
long.
a glitch.
That was a bit of a glitch that wasn't their fault. But they used Companies House, they used names.uk. So it was about registering intellectual property and finding the right name. It was about crowdfunding and raising finance. And it was about, the third sort of practical thing was it a bit about marketing? I can't remember.
Marketing, it was a marketing guide.
So it was about sort of, you've got your idea, you've got your prototype, but how do you make sure that you're not treading on anyone else's toes? How do you get the money to do it? So that was kind of quite sort of nitty gritty in a sense of how you might get a small business up and running.
And then the third day was all about showing your brand, showing your profile on LinkedIn, creating your brand, social media, creating
a website. They all created a little website. They all they did Twitter pitch and the elevator pitch, and they did Twitter pitches and elevator pitches. And they had a talk that afternoon from possibly the least impressive speaker who,
bless her, she was great. She just had a few technical issues, and unfortunately she was talking about being authentic and having being authentic with your brand, your profile, and she had a filter on her face, and unfortunately every time she turned, her eyebrows were over here, so it was a bit embarrassing, and I'm sure she will be remembered for
I didn't really. I mean, the trouble is, I was just fixated on her eyebrows, wondering where to go next. So if I was fixated on her eyebrows, I don't think that the kids probably didn't pay any attention, which was a shame because she was very much. She did some good stuff. She was talking about their own LinkedIn profile. She was talking about how they need to be very, very careful about what their own online presence is. Some really good stuff there.
And I think in hindsight, we would have preferred the second speaker, Jez Brooks, from IBM. He was very inspirational, and I think maybe the final day to cap it off with somebody like that would have been lovely. But you learn as we've never done it before. So
what they did at the end of each day, they collected feedback from them. A very simple little basically what went well, even better if type bit of feedback, and they got them to rate it. We had sort of particular individual students we were asking directly because we still haven't had our feedback session with them. This organisation did a big talk last night, and they were obviously quite geared up about that. The talk itself wasn't particularly good, but we haven't yet had our feedback with them, and
Mm.
also we haven't seen yet what the students themselves have produced, apart from a couple of students who've sent their stuff directly to us as well, because what they did was they effectively put all of their stuff into a sort of PowerPoint effectively as a pitch deck, and that was their submission. And they did all of this in groups, or the majority of them did this in groups. And actually, that was the bit which, again, there were some glitches. They've previously run these sessions on Zoom, and Zoom has a maximum of 50 groups you can have, even for the sort of full paying kind of one. And we needed more than 50 groups. So they set up separate Google Meets, and they basically randomly allocated the students into groups of 5, sent the emails to the students, and we obviously had to do a lot of data interchange between them, and that's something they need to get their act together slightly a bit more about GDPR and data interchange. But we sent them across basically all the students who had paid for the internship. MIS was involved, our head of IT was involved. They then randomly generated groups of 5, created Google Meets for them, and sent emails back to the students using their college email addresses saying, you're in a group with these, there's 5 people in your group, and this is your Google Meet link. And the Google Meets links didn't work. So in the first 10 minutes of the whole thing on Monday morning, it just looked as though it was just going to go completely tits up.
Well, you were panicking, weren't you?
I was panicking big
But
time.
anyway, it was fine. It was very, the
But
students
they
were
got
very
round.
resourceful, weren't they? They were resourceful. They got into groups. They actually joined groups that they wanted to be in. So in a way, they ended up being
some
in
of them
groups
ended up being
people
with
they
their
knew.
friends. Some of them ended up being in a big, there were
Yeah.
kind of 2 or 3 big groups. So if you haven't managed to get yourself into a group, come into
Yeah.
this group. What they often did in theirs was do their own product, or their own idea, but they showed it and shared it with other people in the group to get feedback. So one of our things said, I actually did my own idea, but it was really nice in the group I was in, because we were kind of continuously sharing ideas and giving feedback to each other on what we thought this is the best kind of, stuff. And one of our colleagues, her son was doing it, and she came up and spent a long time with us on the Thursday morning saying how much he had enjoyed it. He doesn't talk about anything normally. He doesn't give her feedback about anything that he does at college, and he was raving about it. We had lots of students say that they'd made really good friends with people that they'd never met before. They were in online groups, and I think that that's pretty amazing to say that they'd made good friends with people that they'd just spent 3 days online with. And they basically did what, certainly the companies, we had a few students do sort of PwC and EY work experiences last year, which was basically the same thing, a bit of an introduction. They probably got more input in it about the different aspects of kind of business. They still had to do a presentation. They still had to, it wasn't a live presentation. They're doing it in their pitch deck. They'll get feedback on it. They still had to go through all the processes of research, of working in groups, teamwork, leadership. We encouraged them. 8 Billion Ideas, sort of, they needed a bit of encouragement, so we were kind of on a chat with the presenter all the time, and sometimes making suggestions as to how he should suggest, so that the same person didn't lead everything all the time. Perhaps the person who leads on the ideas generation should hand over to somebody else who decides to lead on the website, somebody else who decides to lead on the Twitter pitch. So they weren't, they could have perhaps, they left the students up to do it a lot of themselves, and the students were continually putting stuff in chat, but we couldn't see the chat. We could only have a chat with the presenter.
Yeah.
And I think I can see why they did that, because in effect they were offering it and they didn't want us to be too involved. But it's difficult to know how much 8 Billion Ideas were editing what they say was going on. But we didn't get one email from a student, and we didn't get one email from a parent saying it was crap and saying it was rubbish or saying it was a waste of time.
Yeah, well, that's what we were waiting for. And there was
negative
nothing.
feedback, and we were absolutely prepared for a whole load of kids and parents to come and say, "Oh, this was rubbish. Why did you make us do this?" Or for the numbers to drop off drastically,
No, they didn't.
and for there to be nobody left at the end. And neither of those things happened. So I think because neither of those things happened, You know, they felt like they got a good experience, and they've basically had, I mean, students were doing it who were also going to go off and do medicine, who were going to go off and do veterinary science. They still did it because it was a 3-day useful thing. And one of them said, I was talking to one of my vets on Friday, and he said actually it's really good because if I go to be a vet, eventually I will run my own business. I had no idea about a load of that stuff. You know, that was a really good idea. I know things will be different in 10 years' time when I become a vet or whatever, but it was actually really good for even those who knew what they were going to do, because they just got a bit of an idea about what's out there. Loads and loads of them developed apps. They didn't have to, but the vast majority, I think, from what I can gather, developed some form of app.
Yeah, we're going to get we'll probably do a gallery and share it with all the interns of all the work that was submitted, you know, and share the work and showcase the work, because some of the work was really good. So that's what we'll do.
But
You know,
they got a 3-day internship at a business, and
Yeah.
they'll be able to say that they completed a 3-day internship, you know, as a research intern at a business, and during that they developed whatever it was they developed, and they'll be able to use it as evidence for some of those soft skills. And I mean, I really want to do it next year again. I think there are things, you know, both on the practical side, the delivery side, that 8 billion ideas need to take on board. But I mean, I think I was so nervous about it. I was so nervous about kind of putting this on and basically saying you've got to do this or organise your own. The fact so many organised their own, I think, was great too. And we had quite a lot of social media from people who had our students last week saying, oh, it's been lovely to have so and so on work experience, and you know, great, they've been great, and we've had some good feedback, and we're going to send a sort of a reminder to fill out the feedback forms, and a big thank you to all of the face-to-face people. But I mean, I never in a billion years thought that we could hit 80%, which is going to look really good when I do my next compass, you know, to put it crudely. In circumstances where I thought work experience was just completely off the radar, and having the 3 days was a really critical part of it, because I think it kind of links to something somebody said a bit later, time allocated for careers in the tutorial programs, because having those 3 days, now I mean, you know, there are 15 or 16% of kids who did nothing, and you know, an Ofsted inspector is going to ask us, so what about the 15% of students who didn't do anything? And we'd need to follow that up. And we need to find out whether it's because they just couldn't be asked, or because their parents decided they could go away for a long holiday, or whether they've already got a part-time job and didn't feel like they needed it. So I do want to find out about the 15% who weren't involved, but to have about 85% doing something, we reckon was pretty good. And that there were no negative, and the only feedback we had, so say from parents and stuff, was positive. So I think they've got something which they could really, you know, they could really market to people like us who have huge numbers of students that, you know, are really, really hard to all place individually in face-to-face work experience. And I think, you know, it would never have happened without COVID. So in a sense, I think that bit is still here to stay. Sam.
Hi, Nicola. That all sounds really, really interesting. As Ellen was saying, we were really keen to hear your feedback on that. My question is just about sort of thinking about next year. What changes, you know, do you think would need to make? So this year it's been a little bit flexible in terms of Gatsby 6 and, you know, all of what you need to do to meet that benchmark. I think the question I was wondering, you were talking about feedback. So has the feedback on their work and presentations, is that still to come, and is that something that you're doing, or will 8 billion ideas be doing that part of it as well for you?
8 Bill are doing that for us, and it is still to come.
Okay.
So they said that every group or every submission will get feedback, and we'll get a written feedback, which will be sent to them, and that's all by 8 Bill. So we're not doing that, but obviously they will show it to us, but we don't have to give the feed. In effect, we're not giving the feedback. It's coming from them. Okay. And so until we see what feedback they get, if you see what I mean, we can't sort of make it. Again, we haven't really finished the process yet completely, so I don't know what sort of feedback it will be. But each one, I hope, will be sort of tailored to the product or the idea or the app or whatever it is that the student submitted. It won't. There'll be a bit of generic, I expect. You know, a bit like all of us when we write our references. but I'm hoping it's going to be fairly sort of personal to the product, not personal to the student, but personal to the product.
Yeah.
Okay. And was it
It
a
will
flat fee that was agreed, or was it a price per student? So you needed to commit to a certain number just on pricing.
Yeah, we had to commit to, well, we basically committed to 14,000, which was 400 students or something, and we got more than 400. I suspect that was a kind of a mate's rate type thing, perhaps. I mean, I think I would have been prepared to have subsidized it actually from my budget if necessary. If I think overall I would have been prepared to put some money in from my budget in addition if they'd kind of eventually wanted more, so to speak. But by getting them to pay something, I feel that was quite important. That was the buy-in. I did think it was quite important to get the students to pay. And we did that through Shop, and our online payment isn't actually very easy. Parents can't pay for stuff without the student being logged into the college portal, so we don't have a parents portal effectively. So obviously a lot of the time the parents would have paid, but the student had to be there. So there was a lot of last minute stuff. And I think, again, because some kids were hoping to get work experience face-to-face organised over half term, we had about 30 latecomers who registered in half term. And I wanted to kind of, because I was really torn between saying there's a deadline. You didn't get it in by the deadline, you can't do anything. And saying, well, actually, there is this online thing going on. And if you didn't get your face-to-face thing organised by the deadline, then better late than never, But the fact that was during half term meant Kat had to spend 2 days of half term working to do all of that, which was why I think actually probably either the end of that week after half term or the end of the week prior to half term would, time-wise, be a better time. But when we had committed the 14,000, it was then £30 a head. So because we got more than 400 students, we then paid them some more money. And again, I sort of think that was fair because they'll have to give more feedback to more groups and stuff. So we paid them in total about 16,000 or something, I think.
And how did it fit in with your exam cycle? Because that's obviously at that time of year.
It would be after our exams. So our exams, some people were doing them before half term, some people are doing them now. Next year, it looks as though it's going to be the 3 days after our progression exams. So, we'll finish our progression exams, and we always have a catch-up date for marking for staff, so that'll be one of the days. We always have an inset day. That'll be another day. We'll probably only lose, in inverted commas, one whole day, which probably nothing would happen anyway. So yeah, I mean, it's like anything. It was a big. I think that 8 Billion Ideas have got a good product that could actually really help solve. And I think even after COVID, I think with the move towards hybrid working, I think that meaningful, it's a meaningful experience, isn't it? That is the key thing with Gatsby. It's not an afternoon visit. It's a meaningful experience. It was a meaningful experience. I will justify to the nth degree that if we do the same thing next year and there are no COVID restrictions in place whatsoever, that is still a valid work experience, and they are still getting a valid experience of the workplace, and they're still getting valid interactions with employees and employers. So from sort of Gatsby 5 and 6 perspective, I have no concerns about that, because I think, that is how more and more people will be working. We won't be, because education is probably the least flexible, but everybody else will be.
Did they find the speakers for you as well? Did they organise everything?
Yeah,
they organised everything.
The brief of what we wanted.
We negotiated a bit, and I think our feedback will help them identify good people in their sort of speaker brief. The people who set up 8 Billion Ideas had all been working at IBM.
Yeah.
So there was perhaps a slight
mates connection.
They were using their friends and contacts, and
they do have good contacts. I think
they have got good contacts, and I think those contacts need to be a bit more varied. The funny thing was, people of our generation would know who IBM is. Kids hadn't got a clue. Even the presenters didn't really have a clue.
I think next year we'd want Google. We'd want more, relatable businesses. Actually, I mean, LinkedIn's fine. LinkedIn is probably one we'd keep, right? Because it's relevant to the business market, but possibly, yeah.
Ellen.
Sorry, unmute. Just to recap, so about 85% of them did it. How many was that? Can you just say that again? The number of students.
So we had 470. It was 85% did something. It was 478. So we had, our cohort is just under 9. It is just under 1,000. It's about 950 this year. Our cohort, and we had 478 on the internship.
Yeah.
And we'll get a register for every day. So we actually need to see. What we will do is then work with MIS and basically say attended day 1, attended day 2, attended day 3, and then submitted. So there'll be sort of a register that we'll get that will somehow log. We haven't quite worked out how we're going to do that. And then about 350 did about 250 did face-to-face work experience.
Yeah.
And
whether it was virtual or whether it was there. And then about 50 had done SpringPod or Invest In or any of those other ones.
There's actually more. I've checked today. There's actually 340 now.
Okay.
On the independent work. So yeah.
So if they've done something independently but not in those 3 days, would that count? Because we just have a lot that already done it at another February half term or Easter or sometime.
As long as they got the certificate. The key thing was they won't get it kind of validated in inverted commas unless they've got the certificate.
Right. Okay.
So I mean, there's quite a lot of admin that we've now got to do with Kat. Alex has just gone. It's quite a lot of admin we've got to do, because what we want to then somehow put onto the database is to register what they did and what they, and they're all registering it and recording it themselves in Unifrog. But we want to.
They have to. You mean?
Yeah. We want to keep a record of it again, so that we can first. I mean, we've got spreadsheets galore. We used to organise our work experience through a database, but the database was Access and of course has just died. So we've got spreadsheets galore. We did loads of stuff through Microsoft Forms. I have to say Microsoft Forms for collecting the data and then being able to download it as a spreadsheet was brilliant. And then using that to generate the email merges and all that kind of thing was really good. But, and if the students, if the students had done an Invest In or a SpringPod or whatever, because I suppose we didn't check those in inverted commas. We did just say, but we have been trying to get them to share, that business where they can share with the college or school they're at. So we are being able to.
Well, we do check the SpringPod because they get the certification. Speakers for Schools, we have to. We approve anyway, as you know. Invest In, we get a list as well, actually. So we do check them all, make sure they're actually legitimate.
But I mean, those were, there were some people who'd done them in February half term and they effectively got a 3-day extra May half term, but they'd done it in February half term, which is fair enough. You don't want to penalise. Some of them, a few of them did both. I mean, I think it's one girl who put about 4 things in, and so I kept thinking, God, she's here again. I'm double counting her. So actually the numbers aren't quite so good because I can't count 4 things for one student, and had to cut it down to one person. But
that's good. I just like Alex, I'm going to need to leave in about 10 minutes, so I'll just leave when I need to leave to go and teach. But thank you. That's really useful.
Yeah. Rebecca.
I was just going to say, the students who organised their own virtual, like through SpringPod, did you check up that they did 3 days worth? Or was it just they've done something and that counts?
Yeah, they've done something and that counts, because some of the SpringPods are only a day, aren't they? So it's
so
long as they were doing something.
To sign up for 3 of them? Or
no,
whatever.
no. Just as long as they signed up for something and they evidenced it, then it's fine.
And at this point, that sort of, I'm saying for the moment is that's something we need to consider going forward when we come out of COVID. I think for the COVID perspective, we're happy that that's okay at the moment. But for the sort of 3 days element of it, I mean, somebody did do 3 actually. But for the COVID element of it, we'll place more of an emphasis on at least 3 days when we get back to normal. I think that's something we need to take on board. Very quickly though, I mean, other things which are on the agenda, things about sort of mentorship schemes was something. I can't remember who wanted to talk about that.
I think we were I was talking about that with Sam actually. You remember we touched upon
Yes.
ideas about what we can do with mentorship, because actually even 8 billion ideas talk about it. Quite frankly, they talk about how important it is to have mentors within business sectors. And yeah, I thought I'd just flag, where did you get any further with that idea? Because that's something we are thinking about as well, you know, having mentorship
Yeah.
schemes or partnerships with big corporate
Local businesses.
local businesses, yeah, initially, and then possibly some corporates. How do you feel about
It's
that?
not something we've taken forward any further, but
Yeah.
what I would say is I am aware that some of the big companies do it already. So Allen and Overy, that's part and parcel of it, when those that qualify for that and do it. So I am aware that it does take place in a kind of controlled way already.
Yeah.
I think where we have maybe done it on an individual basis, we've because I think part of the difficulty is around sort of getting appropriate consent and the fact that you're dealing with adults and the students. So we've handled that by getting, you know, parents to agree to what we're setting up. I think former students, one of the things I didn't say is that we've been working a little bit with our alumni, as indeed I know that you have, Kat.
Yeah.
And you know, people also come forward and say, you know, hey, I'm now working in law, I'd really like to mentor some students. And it was that kind of conversation of, that's a great offer, how do we deal with it in practice?
Facilitate it? Yeah.
It happens at the university level, and so they're sort of saying, oh, I'm working with my old university and helping mentor students, but it feels like maybe it's just a little bit more difficult because most of them will be under 18. So I think it's a great offer, a great concept, and it's just how we manage it from a safeguarding perspective.
Yeah.
I just signed up to be a mentor at my old university to find out how they're running it, in the sense of, I don't really want to be a mentor, I've got quite enough to do, but I want to find out what they want me to do and what guidance they provide and all that sort of thing, almost so that we can then, you know, to see how they're running it, and see if we can basically steal some of what they're doing, because I think you need to have some sort of understanding, don't you? If you're going to be a mentor, what does this actually mean, and what does this, and it might be different if it's kind of somebody in a local company. I mean, one of the things I'm wanting to do, which we haven't done, and I know a lot of you are much better at this, you've got better links with local companies and you have careers fairs for your students. We really don't have a careers fair. We have a big HE fair, which we can't wait to do face to face, although we won't do our subject seminars face to face anymore. Doing that remotely was just a revelation. So we didn't have ridiculous rooming constraints, and we did all of that virtually in March, and we'll do so again, possibly on a different day, to the face-to-face, you know, everybody in the sports hall with the unis type thing. But we don't have the sort of contacts with local employers that I think some of you have much better. And I kind of feel that if we could say, you know, we'd like somebody from your company to mentor X students, and to have some sort of, what we mean by this is, you know, perhaps a series of meetings or an opportunity to visit the company, and then a few weeks later, and then perhaps a little mini project that you ask the students to do that they then present back to you or something, and you give, and a real life person gives them real life feedback in real life, even if it's on Teams.
That would be better, wouldn't it, from a
something like that
perspective, Sam, if it was a group mentorship, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so
then you could have go on.
One example of that is we work with a local architecture and planning company, and that came through a parents' evening, and they've done so much for us over in a short period of time, really. So they have had a group in for a little insight meeting, and they offer a lot of work experience. Normally, like literally most weeks of the year, they actually keep a seat in their office for work experience. But they have just finished working with 3D, and they set a beach hut design competition, and then they came and introduced that at the beginning of, worked with the head of department in the scheme of work, so introduced it, let the students do the project, and then judged it at the end, and that was really, really good. So we felt that was an alternative, because it's architecture. It's a little more nichey, not so nichey, but we've obviously only going to have so many students that are interested in and capable of becoming an architect. We felt that was a really good way to kind of like get their input, And although they're not necessarily mentoring the students, if there are any, they have also met our students. We had a student applying for architecture, and she went to meet the architecture director, and he gave feedback on her portfolio. So I think with businesses, it's all, I feel like it's what they're happy to do, what they're comfortable with doing. I think this has come a little bit more from alumni as well. So maybe we haven't done it with medics, but that would be a perfect one. You know, maybe if they've just qualified or they're still studying, just to say, look, this is how I found the experience. This is my experience of the course I've chosen. It's something that could be enormously helpful, but you know, you probably need to work with your offers. But it's the safeguarding and how do you run it, and
I mean, if it's through LinkedIn, there's I mean, I know it's a sort of, students can make LinkedIn accounts themselves, can't they? And if they know who, because I've got a panel of medics, vets and dentists talking to current 6-1s on Friday, and I'm going to sort of say to the ones who are, they're like 2nd, 3rd years medics and vets at university, and I'm going to say, look, if you make a LinkedIn account and you are happy, you know, if any of these guys want to contact you on LinkedIn, then that's a professional thing that you're doing kind of independently of me, but you know, that you're an alumnus, join the Esher College alumni group, you know, these students will remember your name, sort of thing. They might look for you. That's something which I'm happy for it to happen that way, through LinkedIn, without us being involved. But then, in a sense, if we're not involved, then to what degree can we claim any credit for it? I suppose.
Yeah.
You know, I suppose I'm all wanting the kids to get the contacts. Whether or not, you know, I can claim credit for it is less important. The time, coming to the sort of time allocated for careers, what are people getting? Do they feel they're getting enough at the moment?
So I think that question came from us, didn't it? I think that was something Ellen put on the agenda. So currently the tutorial programme is half an hour. Oh, you're there, Ellen. Do you want to?
I'm there. I was just getting ready to leave, but I'm
sorry.
A couple of minutes. It's we have half an hour a week of tutorial, but that's to cover everything. So I don't know what the rest of you are finding, but we're finding there's more and more other stuff to cover. So prevent harmful sexual behaviours, county lines. There's just so much other stuff, more and more all the time. Plus this year, there's been lots of notices about COVID and other things. So it's we have barely any in the lower sixth, because the deal is that because we have 2 standalone days in the lower sixth, we don't really get much sort of in week to week in the lower sixth. And then in the upper sixth, in theory, we have our opposite tutorial pathways. So really all the autumn term should be devoted to their progression planning, but even that gets eaten into with other stuff. And then again, kind of, yes, in the spring term, it's, yeah, I mean, there's a bit of, there are weeks about getting ready for uni or getting ready for, more advice about applying for apprenticeships, but it's too late sometimes by then anyway. So we just feel a bit squeezed, I guess. It'd be interested to know how many hours sort of other people had in other colleges.
Colliers, what do you get? You're off. Unmute.
Sorry, apologies. I want to say sounds very similar to Ellen, really, our pattern. Our students get 1 hour a week tutorial, and just the same as with Reigate, we'll be covering all of the safeguarding issues, sexual health, consent, college notifications, everything. So we structure this half term for the first years as their progression planning, where they're thinking about university, they're thinking about, you know, employability routes, apprenticeships, and then in their second year, that autumn term is when they're finishing off their applications, getting CVs finalised, you know, applying for apprenticeships as well as UCAS. So yeah, it sounds very similar to what Ellen is saying, and then I've got to look at the sort of the timeline for the rest of the year, that gap from Christmas up until May half term. I've got to have a really good look at that and think, where else do we need regular slots within the tutorial programme that do focus on careers and progression. So that's one of my focuses for, planning for next year.
What does Godalming get time-wise?
Well, I was just thinking, listening to those, that actually we do pretty well time-wise. With the lower sixth, we usually sort of historically we've kicked it off with a talk in the main hall that Christine and I have done on sort of thinking about your options, etc. That's gone over to a recorded talk, and I think that works fine, which they then watch in tutorial. And then they have a number of weeks when they're, we provide the resources on Godalming Online, but in tutorial they're looking at how to research higher education, how to research apprenticeship and employment options, gap years, etc. They will already have got into their Unifrog in the first term of the lower sixth, so they will already have access to all of that, the subject library, the careers library, etc. And we would encourage them to continue doing that. And then I suppose sort of traditionally that kind of feeds into around about the time that they're going to the UCAS fair at Surrey Sports Park and the apprenticeship fair up at Esher.
Sandown. Yeah,
that's right. And then sort of right now, they were registering for their UCAS applications just before May half term, and then just now they've got 2 weeks looking at personal statements and CVs. So again, we're using Unifrog to help them record their competencies and experiences to feed into starting to draft a personal statement and a CV, also getting them to register to sign up on the apprenticeship site. We've been very conscious, I think, of late that we need to sort of make sure we're not sort of too heavily sort of HE focused, really. I don't know, Christine, what else? That's kind of in a nutshell.
And how much of the week then does this boil down to? You have a tutorial period a week, and a lot of
that's
drop-down days as well.
Three-quarters of an hour for a tutorial period, yeah.
And actually looking at the breakdown of our tutorial program is called Shaping Futures. The careers input is nearly 50% of the program. So we are allocated.
I'd say we're quite similar to you probably, because ours have about, I mean, technically it's up to an hour, but usually it's about 3/4 of an hour by the time they want it to be let out. And about half of the tutor stuff is probably careers orientated, different times of year. And we also get 2 drop-down days in the first year as well. So, I think we have enough time. It's been a bit squeezed because of COVID, so I've kind of sacrificed one of my slots in this period, but actually it was a slot where they used to get told something they didn't need perhaps a whole lesson about, and we're going to have our after Esher day I think it's interesting you're saying you're already doing registering on UCAS and so on, because we don't tend to do that till the very end of the summer term, and then they disappear off on holiday and forget about it, and then they can't remember how to do it when they come back. And I can see that perhaps doing that a bit earlier in the last half of the summer term would be sensible, because they'd be in.
And of course, it's all looking rather different this year, having to sign up for the hub first.
How have you found that?
Yeah, and I've had a message from a tutor this morning saying, oh, they can't work out how to link to us as a centre. So I need to do a bit of research on that, because I think it all is looking a little bit different on their applications this year. We used to be able to sort of just give that answer off the top of our heads. But
I was going to say, I think we all need to get our heads around the fact that it's going to, and I think it's time that it needs to be lifted. There's a couple of questions that are in the chat we haven't come from. Carolyn said, did we negotiate what feedback students received, or is that set by 8 billion ideas? And we haven't really negotiated, other than that said that they will get something, everybody will get something that's written. So they'll get the group who submit, they all had to make sure they had their names on their work, and the group will get a group email. So it won't be a personal email to each individual student, but it will be personal to the group, or if they did an individual project, it will be individual to them. But in a way, because we haven't seen the feedback, that's partly why we say the whole process hasn't quite finished yet. So Ellen, you were asking about uppers or lowers to Sandown.
Of late, the access group, the level 2s, they had a compulsory expedition, and the last couple of years we've publicised it, but we've not taken a group. We did take the lowers one year, didn't we?
Yeah, we took quite a lot of lowers and lots of coaches, but
was it just the one
the
year?
last couple of years, it's just been, we've encouraged them to go, and then we've had our own event in college, haven't we? So
Yeah,
that's
that's
we obviously have our own apprenticeship fair in college.
Yeah. Ellen, before you disappear, but very, very quickly, we wanted to ask you about UCAS and how careers monitor how applications are going, because I think your system is very, very similar to ours. When a student pays, do you log that in as careers, and do you set a number of days timeline in which the teachers need to add references?
Yeah, if they get it in before October half term, it's basically 14 2-week turnaround. Yeah, but then we don't promise that after October half term. We just say we'll get it by the deadline. So that's basically, we're changing it a bit for this year. I mean, we had 1,000 applications last year, so we really needed to look at our processes and make sure they're really streamlined. But I need to go and teach, and I need to be there in 2 minutes. We're all ready to go. So but I can talk to you separately about.
It's how you sort of police that, but maybe we can have a conversation at another time about that.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you.
Who was it who uses competitive applications as a phrase? Because I nicked that.
We
do. You, wasn't it? I thought I nicked it from you.
We entered that. We introduced that a few years ago.
We nicked that from you and introduced it, and we have our competitive applications deadline again before half term, and say we'll deal with it in 2 weeks. What we're going to do this year, I mean, I don't think I've already issued my deadlines to parents and stuff, assuming that the equal consideration date by UCAS was going to be the typical 15th of January. Now they've extended it. I'm not minded to change my deadlines though. No. I don't know what anyone else feels.
We did change at the only deadline. We did actually change our competitive deadline because we changed it to after half term because we're thinking so many of them will want to go to open days.
Yeah.
And also because otherwise, if we get the applications just in before half term, there's then that week gap, and then obviously nothing happens during that week. But parents and students think that we're all working over half term.
You see, we are I think we had it a week before half term, and our secretaries are in. So actually, they quite like being able to do a lot of that. It's not counted as the 10 days, but they are in and they do work. So we kind of quite like that. The thing that we are going to do is we're going to introduce so we keep tabs on it all in the database. There's a sort of tracking system in the database. And what we're adding in is a face-to-face requirement. It can be on Teams or it can be in person, but we've never had a face-to-face requirement. And the time that Sally and now Kat and Veronica are divisional secretary spends emailing and phoning and trying to get them to correct things which they've just forgotten is just ridiculous. And so we actually decided that we wouldn't progress a form unless the face-to-face bit was there, so we can see on track it's been submitted, it's been linked to the college, then it gets sent to progression guidance where we do the checking of the form and the qualifications. And we're going to say that it doesn't matter where the face-to-face comes in. It can be before they submit, where we'll check before they submit, or it could be after they submit, but we will not progress a form unless it's got on their database that they've had a face-to-face. And for 2 reasons. One is that it will just, I think, at the end of the day, save time, because if you get the little sod to sit down and change it there and then, they can get it right. But also it just gives you that chance to have a conversation. So you're applying to such and such. Are they applying to the right sort of places? Because one of the things I've been conscious of is we've had quite a lot of very academic students who should be applying to prestigious universities because they've got really good grades. are applying to less prestigious universities because they think they want to be safe, and they're often quite and they're, oh, I don't think I've only got predicted grades of this, I don't think I'll get in, I don't want to apply to Russell Group. And sometimes it's just a question of lack of confidence. Come on, for heaven's sake, of course you're going to get an offer. You don't have to go there. You can put some of these non-Russell Group ones down as well if you like, but don't you think you ought to put in? Where else have you put in? Where else were you thinking of? Well, I was thinking of Leeds, or I was thinking of Manchester, but I didn't think I put it in. To actually have a bit of a conversation about their choices, because I feel that they are some of them are not applying to the institutions they should be, and having that little conversation would actually help as well. But we'll see how it goes. It might be a nightmare. We might have 900 kids all in the progression office at the same time, which might not be great. Yeah, it'll be one of us, but either Sally, Kat, or me.
And how do you monitor how quickly teachers are adding references?
I can I can see where they are at any point, and there's a kind of a thing that counts how many days a tutor's had it. So when I get a we call it UCAS track, which we called it before UCAS had UCAS track, which is really confusing. So when I say look in UCAS track, it's our UCAS track, not your UCAS track. But there's a sort of a system on our database where it gets sent to the tutor, and it starts counting, and every couple of days I will look down, and they have 3 days to do it in, and anyone who starts to go over 4, I've just got a little default email that says, don't forget you've got UCAS form, don't forget you've got, and then if it gets really problematic because somebody's lost it or is off ill, I can see it quite easily that it comes up, hang on, this one's been here for a week, there's a problem, and then I go in and I ask somebody else to do it or something. So it's all built into our database.
That's a really good system,
which we've had for years. I mean, literally, we've had that for 20 years.
Wow.
Because we could not do it any other way. I couldn't.
Well, it was such a nightmare having to suddenly set up a new system, and we've done it sending flow notifications, but this year we have checked the application right at the beginning of the process and done the approval, but because of our staffing issues largely in the department in the autumn, there is no way we can do that with the number of staff hours we've got. So tutors are going to be checking apparently and approving applications. It will still come to us finally, but we're wondering how we monitor, where does our 20 days start? How do we monitor how things are getting on in the process, really?
I did create a spreadsheet. I'm getting quite into Excel. You can do a lot in Excel, I mean, I did create a spreadsheet for the ones that, because the problem with our track system is we don't have an easy way of, if something's had to be unlocked and returned to the student, our system doesn't follow that. So sometimes a student can have it returned, they think they've done it, but they haven't resent it back. And I created a spreadsheet which I'm happy to share, which so what Veronica, who's the one who unlocks, does is put that student's name in the spreadsheet, and you hit control and semicolon, and it puts today's date in the spreadsheet, and then it automatically counts how many days the student's had it. And then she takes it when the student returns it and it's correct, she kind of takes there were 3 things that the student could be down as, and if it was returned to student, then it counted how many days it was there for. So it was a kind of, and I made this little thing, and I'm happy to send you that if you want to use that as a sort of basis. But that was quite useful as well, because basically, Veronica would open that spreadsheet and she would see there's a student here who still had it for 3 weeks. They still haven't responded, whereas mostly it was only a couple of days, and then they disappeared because she changed it so that they'd resubmitted and they came off the kind of counting mechanism. But the ones who were still counting, that was kind of just a
so you've just got the one person doing the unlocking?
Yes, but we're going to have more doing it when we now do it with the face-to-face check. It will be 4 of us will unlock, but because we will, what we've absolutely got to do is make sure that we don't do something and not track it, Because one of the reasons that we've always just had Veronica doing it is that when she gets them come back in, she's the person who downloads every morning from the UCAS website. So she wanted to know whether it was a novel application.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a resent application.
Yeah.
So she was the one who kept, as she's the downloader, she was the kind of keeper of the of the unlocking as well.
Yes. Yeah.
I think if we and so we generally sort of, if when we're checking, we would then, Sally or Kat or I would send her a list of saying these need to be unlocked. But if we're going to have the kids come to us for a face-to-face, we're going to have to do those unlockings ourselves because we want the kid to do it there and then. And we'll have to make sure, and the thing I think that will be the real onus on us is that we absolutely, within our own system, have to track exactly what we do. Because if we don't track exactly what we do, the whole system will go tits up. And Veronica will have to get less, because she was always, I'm the only person who unlocks it, and we will like let her be the only person who unlocked it, but we'll have to sort of,
it's a big issue, and we periodically have sort of had a blitz on reconciling the lists, but you always worry that you're going to lose somebody in the system who's somehow or other paid and you haven't quite caught up with.
Well, that's the advantage of having this thing on the database, because the student can see where their form is. And so what we do say to students is that, you know, you need to see where your form is, and it will then say sent to UCAS when it's sent. Now, if, you know, we are all fallible, and in a sense, there have been kids who've kind of come to us and said, my form seems to have got stuck with such and such. And actually, that's quite nice, because it's, oh, yes, you know, we're still going to be within our deadline, but thank you for reminding me that. So I think there's a bit of an onus on the student, because we've got this system that we can track it.
Yeah, and they can see. Yeah,
and they can see. So it's like, just because they've submitted it, it's not the end of their role. They can't really relax until actually they know it's been sent by the college. And so I think it's, but again, that's a system that each student can see on their database entry. Shall we sort of wrap up in a sense? I think we've probably shared quite a lot. The thing I'm definitely pinched from, I get one really good idea every single time, is to do perhaps like Reigate, a UCAS talk for parents online in the autumn term, because we carried on doing all our talks live, and I think probably we'll do them hybrid in future. We'll get the parents in for the big talks, but we'll still do them online too at the same time. So we'll be filmed doing them, and so the parents who don't want to come in or want to catch up on a recording can do it. But I'm definitely going to think about doing a parents UCAS talk in the autumn, because I think that will save a lot of phone calls. Sally, you'll write up the notes for us, won't you? And you're off, dear, but never mind. And perhaps somebody else at some point. We generally don't get together in the autumn term, do we? Because we're so busy during UCAS. But it's been really nice to see our new members, and to meet.
It's been lovely to see everyone after so long.
to meet Rebecca and Sarah and Carolyn and so on. So we'll and to see some old faces as well, who are obviously going to still be around, but in a slightly different role.
Yes.
What do you think is going to happen at Godalming then? I mean,
not quite sure really at the moment. I think there'll be some kind of internal arrangement in terms of the kind of overall management of it, and then they'll wait and see how it goes. So I think, yeah, there's quite a lot of change. Have really.
2 careers advisors in a sense there, when there's been such a dearth of applicants for the Collier's job. Did you advertise for somebody to be trained? Because I didn't really get round to saying that Alex, who was here for a bit, we appointed her. She wasn't trained, but we trained her.
Right. I mean, we were kind of thinking, because obviously Marion and I are both qualified careers advisors, it's more as to who takes on the kind of management.
Yeah, I was thinking of Sarah actually at Collier's, asking whether at Sarah they've advertised for somebody to be trained.
Yes, the initial advert that went out, I think they were asking for somebody who was level 6, and then when we didn't receive any applications at all, and then it went out again, and we kind of emphasised somebody who was prepared to study towards level 6, or just had some relevant experience. And again, didn't receive any applications. So it's kind of, where do we go from here with it now? As Rebecca said, we've got somebody temporarily who's with us until the end of this year. So just for the next few weeks, really, to fill an immediate need. But after that, I'm not really sure what the plan is. Just to re-advertise.
Where did you advertise? Did you advertise with the Career Development Institute?
I think probably not, but
that's where you get careers advisors.
I was going to say, where did you advertise? Because both the Career Development Institute, it costs to get your advert, but it's worth it. And the other thing is, get in touch with Canterbury Christchurch.
Too far away.
Canterbury Christchurch University, because they are one of the main providers, along with the CDI, of the training. So they will probably have a jobs board as well. But the CDI, I mean, the CDI is delivering a lot of the training now, and they have a jobs, and we actually did get Alex locally, actually, not through the CDI, but we did advertise at the CDI, and the best jobs are there.
Okay, thank you for that. I make sure that
where's Lucy these days?
Lucy, I believe she finished some point last year.
She's not there anymore.
No, she left some time ago. I think she's working for the local council now. I
wonder where she's gone.
I'm not
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think I need to go as well. But it's been lovely to see everybody, and new and old faces. And let's keep in touch. We'll perhaps Sally will send it round and copy in. We'll put this copy in Sharon, but we'll also put the recording. We'll put it on YouTube so it's accessible to everybody. So we'll put that in the minutes, so to speak, so that if you do want to go back and see what anyone said, you can do. And when we've done a bit more feedback, I think, to 8 Billion Ideas, I think I'll sort of write something up almost for you, so that if you're interested, I think because I really. I think overall it was brilliant, and it gave students opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have had. But like anything, the very first time you do a project, you're always a bit hypercritical. And Kat and I kept going, "Oh, it was a shame about this, a shame about that." We had to keep remembering, actually, it was really brilliant. We didn't get any complaints. 450 of them were still on the call at the end of 3 days, type thing. So, and that's without us having seen any of the stuff, really, or much of the stuff.
Well, thanks for organising. Much appreciated.
Okay, nice to meet you. We're quite useful to look at, aren't we? I was just thinking, possibly we don't tick the diversity box, really, do we, when we were looking at all of us?
God, no.
All white women of a certain age.
Absolutely.
We can't have everything. We've got a good team here, or good extended team. Bye then.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.